and we are back to another very exciting day on Sunday with your host, me, Sam. Today's topic is one that has been a centre of political interest for a lot of groups, and this topic is gay marriage. Should a marriage be defined between a man and a woman, or can any two people, loving and consentful, marry? I feel that the definition of marriage is a taking of sacred vows of love between two consenting people who wish to spend a part of their lives together. To me, that's all it is. To me, it isn't about the piece of paper. To me, it isn't about the tax benefits that come with it. To me, it isn't about the government saying, "Ooh, you two are married." First and foremost, I don't think, if I was to marry someone, I don't need a ring around my finger. It's just that taking of sacred oaths. And with that, a sacred oath implies a religious bonding as such. Things that are sacred don't mean anything to anyone that doesn't have some sort of religious foundation. Which brings me to my main view on this point, that marriage belongs to religion. I don't mean that, we should listen to the religious fundamentalists who are all like, gay is bad, gay anal sex means you're going to go to hell because you're ritually unclean and all this weird stuff, and you shouldn't eat animals with hooves and all this weird religious shit that a lot of these religions say. I shouldn't say religious shit, that's bad of me. But I mean, when you look at it, the Catholic Church and the Christian churches and a lot of churches like to think that they own marriage. But the truth of the matter comes down to the fact that marriage is initially a pagan ritual. Predates Christianity by a long point in time. And Christians, as much as they like to think they own it, they don't. The pagans do, and the paganistic religions are so diverse that there really is no set rule or structure on it, that you can't interpret what they think about it because there is nothing to interpret, because it's so diverse. There's so many different cultures that have their own form of paganism, and thus when Christians tell me that I am not allowed to marry because it's not whatever, I'm like, fuck you don't own marriage. I'm sorry. So when I say it's owned by the religions, it is owned by the person's religion. Each person's religion is open to their own interpretation of it. And if they feel their religious values allow for same-sex marriage, and they want to marry someone of the same sex, and I say, go for it. Then you get situations where someone doesn't think that their own religion allows for it, and they want to marry someone of the same sex. Well, they're just confused, and they need to decide, maybe they need to think about their religious ideas and think, where is this going? Where do I get these ideas? And how can this progress? And think through it on a more inner level. So maybe that in itself is a cue that they need religious exploration. Now, people that aren't religious, and they're probably listening to this and being like, well, why can't I get married? Well, to me, marriage is a taking of sacred vows. The key word being there, sacred. If you're not religious, there's no need for faith. If you're not religious, well, the sacred oath that is involved with marriage doesn't mean anything. And that's where we have another term, which is, in fact, I believe, should be controlled and owned by the state, because it's a social thing rather than a religious thing, and that is civil unions. So I believe that marriage should be controlled by the individual's religious beliefs. If they're part of an organised church, then that church, etc., etc., etc. The government should only have a say in what is referred to as a civil union, which is a secular form of marriage, one without the sacred aspect to it. So that's my personal beliefs in regards to religiousness in marriage and all this other pompous things that are just really iffy and complicated, and people think they own shit they don't. Now, as most of you who watch this Cheers for Queers thing should know that I'm not from America. I'm in Australia, so I don't have a particular state that allows or doesn't allow gay marriage. Gay marriage here, it's not under state jurisdiction marriage, it's under federal jurisdiction. Because we have a Federal Marriage Act. And in that act, it says, quite clearly, a marriage is between a man and a woman. Now, in order to legalise gay marriage in Australia, all you would have to do is make an amendment to that sentence in the Marriage Act, saying that it's between any two people. So in Australia, that's the Australian stance on gay marriage, or marriage in general, that federally it has been decided that marriage is between a man and a woman, and states can't do jack all about that. We have two things in Australia. We have states and territories. A state is like a normal state. A territory is slightly different in the fact that a lot of their stuff is under federal jurisdiction. They don't have their own police force, for example. They have the federal police, and all this stuff, because it's weird and complicated, and they just aren't important, the territories. ACT, we all know Canberra's just the lie that people do to try and make Sydney feel better about itself, since it's not worthy to be the capital. You can quote me on that. But yeah, so what's interesting is that because the territory's under federal jurisdiction, whenever the territories pass an act for that territory, the Prime Minister of Australia has the power to overturn that. Now, a while back, the ACT, or Canberra, passed an act that allowed same-sex civil unions. And, well, the Prime Minister at the time, I think it was a Labour government, but it could have been in the Howard era, so I'm not sure. So it was either Howard or Rudd. One of the two. They overturned it and said, no, we can't have same-sex civil unions. But what's interesting is during the Gillard government, which is also Labour, the ACT brought that act in again, same-sex civil unions. And so far, as the Gillard government hasn't touched it. So this time they haven't overturned it, which is interesting because it makes that step of a territory has gone, well, we're allowing basically the next best thing to same-sex marriage. And this time the government's sort of not doing anything about it, which shows that some sort of progression in that stance. Also, the independents in the Hun Parliament at the moment and the federal government have a lot of sway and influence, and Greens have a large Senate majority. So the Greens are like the really humanitarian party that are really full of crazy left-wing nut jobs. You can quote me on that as well. But yeah, they're pushing for same-sex marriage as well. So there's a lot of people that speculate that in this term it is possibility, especially as we draw nearer to an election being called, that the Labour could push it through as some sort of boost to their campaign to be re-elected. And I think they're having some sort of October conference, Labour conference, discussing the Labour stance on same-sex marriage, which I personally think that it will probably end up with Labour changing their stance. So yeah, that could very well happen as a campaign stunt towards the end of this term, or if the Gillard government do get in next term, the carbon tax could hypothetically, I'm not sure how it will go, but it could mean that the Libs do get in power. And if the Libs get in power, well, we're all screwed, because we all know that the man Mott's in there, Abbott's in there. He gets elected, we're screwed. It's like Tony Abbott is like the Australian version of Sarah Palin, except his party tries to rein him in, so he's not as bad because he's got a bajillion people behind him, and if he makes too bad a mistake, they'll just get rid of him. Australia doesn't have same-sex marriage, however, that we're showing signs that we could be heading towards getting it. But in the end, I don't need a piece of paper to tell me that I love someone. I don't need the government to say, you love someone, to tell me that I love someone. If I love someone, if I marry someone, I'm married to them. Seriously, I don't give a fuck whether the government acknowledges or not. But yeah. That's Sunday. Marriage belongs to religion. Stay the fuck away, stupid government. But, and I said I wasn't going to get political in this. Over and out.